All right, we are live to another episode of Hockey Royalty Live, the official podcast of hockeyroyalty.com. It's episode 183, too short to ride this ride. And we're going to be talking about the Kings season so far and where do we go from here? A little bit of coast to coast sprinkled in. So get in the chat, like and subscribe. You know what to do. Let's go. That intro was brought to you by Ezera. Their new song out now. Listen to it anywhere you guys listen to music. And this podcast is sponsored by Game Time. Game Time is where you need to go get your seats. I know that people, get excited about seeing a game because they don't get to go all the time. So maybe they're looking forward to finding the right weekend, the right day, seeing how much it's going to cost, where they're going to sit. Game Time makes it easy for you. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets easier to see all your favorite teams play, even concerts, theater, whatever you want. Filters out all the fluff so the incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. So I'm looking through the app and I'm like, hey, where am I going to sit? Where do I get to see the most action? So for me, because I don't get to go all the time, I want to sit where the Kings are shooting twice. So I'm sitting here looking around, peeking around. Hey, the Kraken are coming to town on Saturday. I'm finding a killer deal right here, right behind the goal, 137 for 3 rows back of the ice. You can't beat that on Game Time, 137. So snack those up before somebody else eats them. Use this app featured on Customize Your Spot. Customize your app. Let the app know what you like. So find the super deals. Look at the seats before you buy. Lowest price guaranteed, cancellation protection, job loss protection. All kinds of stuff are available through Game Time. So prioritize Game Time picks. Curation makes it easier to save your sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. All-in pricing, toggling features with total upfront, no surprise fees at checkout. Get panoramic views of your seats before you buy. Game Time will guarantee you the lowest price and credit you up to 110% of the difference. Game Time ticket coverage also allows you to purchase a ticket covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the game. So, hey, you're asking yourself, Brandon, how do I do this? Well, you download the Game Time app now. You create yourself an account. You use the code THPN, that's right, THPN, for 20% off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code THPN for 20% off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. Boys, it's game time. It's podcast time. How are you guys doing?
Doing good. Feel like it's been a while, at least for me. You guys have been holding on the fort, so it's good to be back to chatting hockey with you two. How you doing, Joe?
Not bad. Welcome back, Russ. We picked the high school hockey team is officially picked as of last night. Had our first practice today, so we are off and running there. So it's going to be a sprint of a season. So it's always fun time this time of year when team gets picked and you got some fresh faces and so yeah, I'm fired up for hockey season like all over again. Right, the Kings started, NHL started, and now. We're about to get knee deep into the high school season, so it's fun.
How was the vibe after tryouts? You guys feel like you got a pretty good team?
Yeah, a lot of returning guys, which is nice. But we got a couple of nice of fresh faces too. You guys will appreciate this. So we have two young defensemen. One of them over the summer, he was a manager for us last year. And over the summer, I said. You need to go look up Lubomir Visnovsky because that's who he reminds me of. And the other one,
he's like, what?
Yeah, I said, but you go look up.
Do you have the VHS?
Like, who is that?
he did say, who is that? And the other one, now he like Brandon especially would love this, but they're both defensemen, and him, Lubo, and the other one, I was like, you have like Brant Clark. Like his like the way he plays, the way he kind of sees, the way he plays, the way he's like pulls the puck off the wall, walks the line, stuff like that. It's like, holy cow, these are two defensemen that are, they're right up my alley. That's for sure. So
Joe's in heaven.
Yeah, it's fun.
So essentially, you're making him play a stay-at-home defenseman role, aren't you?
Yeah, that's definitely not how we're doing it this year. That's for sure.
Oh man, well, I'm doing all right. A little tired.
Feel that, Rando.
Oh man, I had to take a nap throughout the game last night just to watch the third period, and then
you missed so much.
I know. And I took a nap today after. It was my first day golfing in a long time. Beautiful. It was like 72 today in Texas.
Nice.
So blue skies. Went and played. Shot a 108, which is kind of seems to be my score. I sit between 105 and 115. I was pacing under 100 until the back nine, and the back nine always gets you. Always gets you when you're feeling good. But it was nice to get out on the links and swing the clubs around. So I don't know. I feel tired. I feel beat. I don't know how these hockey players do it at 35, 36, 37 years old every other night. Probably a lot of pain meds and team doctors. That's probably how they do it.
Yeah, Russ, I was telling Brandon before the show, like, because I yawned. He's like, dude, I feel that. I'm like, yeah. I mean, I made 2 periods last night. So obviously that game started after 10:30 local time. And then, as fate would have it, I think both kids were up at 5 a.m. So it's like, come on. There's just no relief. Good Lord.
Well, there's no relief from Kings hockey because Kings keep giving us mediocre games to watch in and out of the season, followed by good games, followed by bad games. I don't really know what to make of the season, boys, and that's what we're going to talk about. That's why this episode's too short to ride this wide. Where is this team falling up short this season based on expectations? And I think Russell's article kind of kickstarted this episode. So, Russ, you went to the game last night begrudgingly, and what sparked this article that you wrote this morning?
Well, it's kind of been a culmination of this entire season to start. There's been some highs, there's been some lows. I feel like the lows aren't necessarily as bad as maybe a lot of fans make them out to be. Disappointing losses in San Jose, disappointing loss at home in overtime or a shootout, forgot, to Chicago. But then you had the 2-game win streak or the back-to-back win streak in Nashville and Minnesota. You've had some big win at home in Vegas after that loss in San Jose. I mean, there's been a lot of road games to start, too. I think last night was only their 8th home game of the season out of the 20 that they played. But it's funny because, like, I was just thinking about maybe, like, putting together, like, an article to kind of sum up I guess, what would be the quarter point of the season. And I couldn't really think of anything to kind of summarize it. And then last night happened. And I'm watching that game, and the first period goes by. And I'm thinking, okay, maybe first period Kings. So I sit next to Andrew Knoll, and we were kind of talking before as the game kind of gets started, and he's thinking like, oh, I think the Kings are going to run through these guys. They're rested, blah blah blah. And I was like, yeah, I think they should probably take this one. And I told him, I was like, the only thing I'm kind of worried about is complacency, because this is really the first time that they've had kind of an extended break. It's only 3 days, but probably the longest break that they've had so far to start the year. And I thought like, I wonder if that kind of time off maybe gets them out of their funk a little bit, maybe gets them a little bit out of sync. And that's pretty much what we saw throughout the entire game. The first period was just mundane, dull, had to get an extra cup of coffee just to get through it. Second period, pretty much the same thing. And then third period, it was just like, as soon as the Sabres scored, I was just like, this game's over. You could just sense like, every time the Kings got the puck in a high-scoring area or even just in a certain shooting area, they felt the willingness to pass it one more time. They couldn't connect on that extra pass. Their neutral zone was just so disconnected, and it was just such a boring game to watch. And it just was like the perfect like illustration of what this entire season has been. It's just been boring. I felt like it's just even with all the fun performances that we've gotten from Brant Clark, your guy Brant Clark, Brandon, like he's been excellent. Like there's no doubting that. Like my guy Alex Ferrier has been on a tear to start. He's been slowing down a little bit lately, but even still, he's close to the league team high in goals. But even with all of that, like Byfield's struggling, Kopitar's still producing, but like it's like I don't want to like disregard everything Kopitar does, but it's like, yeah, Kopitar is producing. It is what it is. Like, yeah, sure, it is. There's fun there, but Fiala's not doing his thing. Dano's struggling. Even Moore's kind of, he had that point streak, but even then, it's kind of like been overlooked. It seems like. So it's just, I don't know. It felt like maybe it was just me, but I kind of just got to the point where I've been bored, and I found myself struggling to find any excitement. And maybe I was thinking, it's like, maybe that's just because there's really no emotion from this team. You don't really see any sort of like intensity from any of these games. It feels like, and like, I didn't want to like dive into that kind of sentiment after the game, but then I go and listen to the players talk. And then we hear Phil Dano, and he gives the same kind of cocky cliche, like, oh, we were just kind of disconnected. We got our chances, but we didn't convert. Then you talk to Adrian Kempe, it's kind of the same thing. We were disconnected. We got our chances, especially on the power play. We got our chances. We just didn't convert. And then Jim Hiller steps up to the podium, and I love Hiller. Like, I feel like Hiller's been a great coach. He tries everything to kind of get the team going. And then he goes up there and says, I thought it was a really good hockey game. I thought it was high event, high intensity. And it's funny because, like, even all the media is kind of looking at each other after it was over, and we're like, was this guy watching the same game? Like, what was that? And that's where I was just kind of like, okay, like, somebody's got to ignite some emotion into this like team right now. And I thought it was perfect because I know the Bannermen on their Twitter account shared right before the game started, if anybody remembered what happened the last time the Sabres came into town. And that was when Drew Doughty shared that cookie comment. And that was when they were struggling and all that. And I think McClellan was fired like shortly after or whatever. And it's just kind of like, I wish Drew Doughty was here to kind of give us a recap of what happened in that game, because I felt for the fans. I felt for everybody that tuned in to watch. I felt for Joe that even had to get through 2 periods of that, like all the East Coasters, because it was just like, it like made me disappointed as a fan of the sport to have to sit through that game, because it was just like, it was just boring, more or less.
Well said, Russ. I kind of, it's almost like that Sabres game is in a way a microcosm of the entire season, where if you were to look at the numbers, and this is, I'm sure Jim Hiller as a coach is like, we did what we had to do from, like, we controlled most of the game from a shot standpoint, from a scoring chances standpoint. They were well within their structure because they didn't give up a ton. So I think from a coaching standpoint, like, the process of the game was quote unquote fine. And, it's kind of been that way for the Kings all season. From a process standpoint, 5-on-5, they continue to be one of the kind of ho-hum better teams in the league in terms of, again, the process, right? The shots, the scoring chances at 5-on-5, they're doing a good job there. But, like, then you look at the standings and they're, a point out of first place in the division. So it's like, but then it just doesn't feel like it though, right? Like, it certainly doesn't feel like last night was a good game, despite what Hiller said. But I understand why he would say that. It doesn't feel like they're 1 point out of the division lead, but here they are. It's been a strange feel. I can't get an accurate like vibe on this start of the season. Like, they're a point out of first, but they're 2 points out of not in the playoffs. It's just kind of strange. So I don't know, Randon, like where to take this conversation, because I think Russ really hit on a lot of it. I don't know.
I think he hit on the frustrations, and excuse me. I mean, I'm frustrated too. Excuse me, man. I'm frustrated too, and I just think this team doesn't have an identity. This team still doesn't have an identity, and we're almost a quarter of the way into the season. I mean, yeah, they're good 5-on-5. They have no power play. The players that we thought would excel this year didn't. Byfield's been abysmal. Moore's been abysmal. Dano can't drive a line anymore. We have Kempe not being able to put the puck in the net consistently outside of one game. We have statues for defensemen outside of Brant Clark. Jordan Spence has been inconsistent. The only bright spot to this team, in my opinion, has been Brant Clark. Gavrikov has been really great. Laferriere in the beginning of the season and Kopitar. Other than that, this team hasn't really they've had flashes as players throughout the whole season, but I haven't really seen a player outside of Laferriere or maybe Gavrikov and Clark have like a week or 2 weeks of consecutive good play. Maybe Turcotte's at the beginning of the season, if I think back now, but like there's really no identity to this team. Like it doesn't seem like there's emotion there. It doesn't seem like they want to win. And that's outside looking in. And I know professional athletes, that's not the case because that's what they do for a living, but it doesn't seem like there's any momentum in any real direction. And we talked about this last week is that the Kings have had the easiest schedule to start the season. Like they should be more consistent. They should be at a higher level. And if you were to pick any other team, Vancouver, the Knights, Edmonton, to take a run at first place, it wouldn't be the Kings for me.
It's funny you say that. And I saw this and I was very surprised at this. I don't know if either of you did, but at the same point last season, they took, I forget, and I cannot remember who tweeted this out, but it was basically the point differential from this point last season where teams were. The Kings have lost they're the second like worst differential from last season in terms of point differential, which I didn't.
Yeah, I think I saw it too. Yeah,
which was honestly a little surprising because again, they're a point out of first in division. I don't think the results have been like terrible, despite it being kind of a nothing really to write home about type of start to the season. But I guess, when you consider how hot they started last season, I guess that plays into it. But I kind of agree with your last point there, Randon. When you look at the teams that are not in the playoffs right now, I think Colorado's on the outside looking in. I think Edmonton is still on the outside looking in. And when you take a look at the standings in the Western Conference and you specifically the Pacific Division, I would imagine a healthy Vegas stays, but then it's like if we imagine Colorado to make the playoffs, like who's coming out? Like the two wild cards right now are Edmonton and Vancouver. I'm hard pressed to find that Calgary and LA finish ahead of both of those teams. So presumably, if Colorado's getting in, it's one of LA and Calgary that are coming out. In theory, I mean, I know we're still a little early here, but when you start to do those things with the 20 game mark here, just trying to like say, okay, where the heck are we at? Where do we sit? What's the, what are we looking at the standings standpoint as far as the division goes, and then the Kings specifically? And I have no strong feel on this team one way or the other, and I tend to lean on strong 5-on-5 play. So like usually I'm the guy that's like, hey, the process is there, like they're one of the better 5-on-5 teams, but boy, it just doesn't feel like it. I still think the idea of being a defensive first, structured first team and building your roster that way, it may let you control a lot of games 5-on-5 because you don't give up hardly anything. I just think you got to create in this league. And I still think the Kings lack there. I still think the Kings are a team that's lacking in terms of offense, and they're still, I think, probably a little bit too defensive-minded and too structured, if you will. But I don't know. It's hard to say because at the end of the day, they're sitting in a decent spot in the standings.
I just don't want to be like, oh, they're in a decent spot. The team's not playing great. Their power play is abysmal. They can't make a tape-to-tape pass. Nobody wants to shoot the puck. It's always, let's make the extra pass or feather this pass or try to make the best pass. Like, shoot the freaking puck. Like, Fiala seems like he's the only person that wants to release a shot. And to me, it's just, I was going more at, like, if you were to place a bet right now, because the Pacific is so cluttered, which team is out and which team is in, I have faith in every other team to make a run. I really don't have the faith the way this team is playing to make a run, like at the first place in the division. And maybe that's just pessimism and based on what we've been seeing lately. I get it. And their 5-on-5 data is great, and scoring chances aren't a predictable stat from year to year, as we saw with Laferriere from last year to this year, and then the team. So maybe that's something that could uptick for the team. I just don't know. I again, how there's no identity for this team. It's hard for me to pick, a fine point on where to tweak going forward.
I want to ask Russ this.
Yeah.
There's a comment from Common Sense here. It's kind of going along what Randa was just saying, and I had touched on it too. And generally, I lean on, if you're a strong 5-on-5 team, like I'm gonna believe in that. And Common Sense comes into the chat and says, trust the data. Kings are a great 5-on-5 team with big upside because they're underperformers by so many players. This is a situation where it's like, yeah, it doesn't feel great. Yeah, it's not all that sexy, but at the end of the day, they're a point out of first in the division. The 5-on-5 play is very strong. And maybe these are too big of ifs, but if you start to see some guys turn some things around performance-wise, i.e. a Byfield, maybe more consistency out of a Trevor Moore, Philippe Deneau, and then in turn, you get the power play clicking at least a little bit more. Even if it's just a league average power play, it's going to be an improvement.
At this point.
Right? And then eventually you get Doughty back. So could we be looking at a situation where it's like they're kind of keeping their heads above water despite kind of it's not seemingly going great, but under the hood it's actually not bad from a analytical standpoint, which is again tend to lean on that. It just doesn't feel like that. I don't know. What do you think, Russ?
No, I totally agree. And that's kind of why at the end of the article I mentioned, I was like, I have full confidence this team's going to make the playoffs. And that's specifically why, is because you look at some of those 5-on-5 metrics. I mean, they're first or second in the NHL in expected goals against per 60 minutes. So, and Brandon, like, I don't want to push back on you a little bit, but I think this is their identity. Like, I think Jim Hiller is totally fine losing games 1-0 as opposed to losing games like 4-3. Like, that's what they want to have happen. So if they're playing strong defense and they're not scoring, I think that's why Hiller comes to the podium and says, like, hey, I thought it was a great game. Like, he's totally cool with that. Yeah. And this is what they've talked about all season. So that's their identity, which is unfortunate for us fans who are trying to watch like an entertaining game on ice. Like, it just kind of takes away from that, because it's like, okay, well, now it's like, if this is kind of what you want, it's like, why even go away from the 1-3-1 like this? What was the point of that? You're not opening up any offensive opportunities, especially for when you're talking about trying to limit a lot of the offensive capabilities of your best defenseman in Brant Clark. You're talking about trying to him hone more on defense. So if you're playing a 1-2-2, you're not going to allow him, and you're kind of contradicting yourself, because you switch to that kind of format in the neutral zone, but then you're trying to kind of rein him in a little bit, telling them, hey, like, you can't really do too much of that. And it's funny too, like Brandon, like you mentioned too, like you think Trevor Moore is being a bit abysmal. He was on an 8-game point streak going into last night's game. But it's hilarious because, like, I felt the same way. Like, I would have
bet my house that was a fake stat.
Yeah, I was watching, like, so they have the TVs like above that show like the pregame, and they's like, oh, Trevor Moore is on an 8-game point streak. It's like the longest on the team, or like in the last 3 or 4 years. And I was like, what? I didn't even know that. Like, but it's funny because, like, that's like, we all feel this. I felt the same way, at least, is like, I didn't know he was on an 8-game point streak. It's like, maybe it felt so under the radar, or like it's just been so noticeable or whatever. But like just, the identity is just, this team is going to focus so hard on defense that it's maybe taken away a little bit by the offensive game or side of it. And that's why maybe like we're seeing like players like Byfield, Deneau, Fiala struggle so much, is because the defensive side is so strong.
And this is Jim Hiller. Remember, and I remember writing an article sometime last season after X amount of games that Hiller had done. There was some thought the Kings are under Jim Hiller as interim coach. Maybe we'll see a little bit of offense open up, right? Because he ran the power plays, a little bit more of an analytical mind, quote unquote. So like, maybe there's this thought that maybe the Kings would see a little bit more offense. We didn't at all. If anything, he locked it down even more so and became an even more so defensive team and defensive structure. So, which I think at that point it was survival, right? Get into the playoffs. That was all he was focused on, and he did that. But then coming into this season, are they going to open it up a little bit more? They're getting away from the 1-3-1. Okay, but now you look at the numbers. Their expected goals for per 60 right now, 2.76. Last season, expected goals for per 60, 2.75. Almost identical. The defensive numbers, though, are even stronger. It was 2.29 against last year, 2.06 against this year. The defensive numbers are so strong. Jim Hiller is a lock it down defensive coach. And that's why he comes to the podium last night and says, I think that was a great game, because this is right up his alley. This is not to go on a whole philosophical.
The coach that was brought in to make the power play magnificent is a defensive minded coach.
Evidently, it's what he's
at least
leaning
5 on
into.
5, yeah.
It's what he's leaning into. Now,
Well, and like what has he said? Like who has he told us is his mentor? Is the guy he met looks up to the most?
Yeah.
Jacques Lemaire. The guy who pretty much like created this mundane style of hockey play with the Minnesota Wild for all those years. And like, I don't know if maybe it's just me. I just didn't want to believe it, but it's pretty much what we're seeing right now. And the unfortunate thing is like, the Wild never won any cups. They just became this 8 seed that kind of just struggled their way into the playoffs and then never really made any noise there. Yeah. And I feel like, unfortunately, that's where we could be heading.
You guys know where I'm at on this. I think that there's very much a ceiling to this type of play, and I just don't think you find any sort of sustained playoff success playing this way. Now, that said, this is going to come across a little bit. Does the organization care? Because if, in theory, I was tweeting about in a conversation with somebody about, they were talking about ownership or something like that, and it was like, the three straight playoff exits or whatever, first round, they can't be happy. I'm like, I'll be honest, like they've made playoffs 3 years in a row, so they've had 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 home playoff games, 7 to 8 home playoff games the last 3 seasons. So, that's good money right there from an ownership standpoint. Now, so I don't know, like, I don't know if there's, if the ad or like the just get in and see what happens. We don't care about how we do it. Find your way into the playoffs. Let's get some playoff gates and see if you can get past. We'll see what happens. But I think like that's kind of what it feels like right now, because that's probably why Jim Hiller's still here, and they didn't end up going somewhere else, because we've seen as an organization, this is how they want to play. This is how Rob Blake wants to build his roster, is this strong kind of 200-foot 5-on-5 structured type of team. And Hiller's does it. He's doing it in that sense. He's doing a really good job, because he's got them playing extremely well at 5-on-5, and especially on the defensive side of the puck. So I don't know that that's how you win in this day and age, but
you sound like you're pitching this team to a board of trustees. That's what you sound like.
That is what, so
that's what they're doing.
5-on-5, like that. Yeah. But like, does anybody think this team's a cup team? Like,
no. And to be clear, Randon, I agree with you. Like, you're right, and I'm just saying, like, that's how I think the organization could be spinning it in that boardroom. Frankly, right? That's what I think could be going on, which again is frustrating, because I don't know how you can sit here in this day and age and say, like, this is how you win. This is how you go deep in playoffs, when it's just not. It is not at all how you do it. But I don't know, Brandon. It's a little frustrating.
I think the expectations to fully push, like, or make a playoff push, are now kind of reached. It's like finally reached a high point, because, I mean, let's be real. Like 2 years, or what? The first time they made the playoffs and they lost to the Oilers, it was kind of a surprise, right? Like, nobody really expected the Kings to be where they were. Doughty was injured most of the season. Sean Durzi kind of came out of nowhere. So, and they still gave a pretty good push to the Oilers in the playoffs. So it was like there's still some excitement even with the loss. It was like, okay, we have something building now. Let's see what happens. The next year is almost kind of the same thing. Like, even with the Oilers, even when they lost to the Oilers, they still took them to 6 games. All the games were close. It could have gone either way. So there was still kind of that same sentiment. I think last year, was what really started to frustrate fans, because you traded Gabe Velarde, who was quickly turning into a fan favorite, for a guy in Pierre-Luc Dubois, who just didn't work out. You faltered again in the first round of the Oilers. And now it's like, okay, well, what the hell? Like, what is going on? Because now it just seems like you have no direction. Your young stars are Quentin Byfield and Brant Clark are really the only good young stars that you have. I mean, Alex Fair is now starting to come up a little bit. Turcotte too. But even then, you're just, like you said, there just feels like there's like no direction now for this team. It just seems like they're just totally fine with, hey, we'll just limp into the playoffs and we'll see what happens there. Because, yeah, like if you ask everybody who watches hockey, nobody's picking the Kings to be a cup contender right now. I mean, we talked about it a couple of years ago. We were so high after the 2 games in Minnesota and Nashville, and things looked great. But now it's like, okay, well, now we're back down to earth. And now you're starting to see this team for really what it is. It's just like, it's a defensive group with about 4 or 5 stay-at-home defensemen who don't really move the puck that well. And it's an offense that just feels so disconnected, where you have young players that can't figure out the center ice position. You have wingers who are turning the puck over left and right, and you have a power play that can't execute. And it just seems like this is going to be the storyline throughout the entire year. So I don't know. It's just hopefully ownership, like you said, those board of directors or whatever, that board meeting that they go to, are starting to realize, like, hey, this can't happen anymore. Like, there's got to be some sort of expectations now for this team to make finally make like some type of push. Because right now, like, if they made like I mentioned, if they made the playoffs, like, it feels like there's an inevitability where they're going to face the Oilers in the first round, they're going to lose. Like, that's where I feel like right now, like, it's going to happen, because I can't pick them to beat the Canucks in 7 games. I can't pick them to beat the Oilers. I can't even pick them to beat Stars, Jets, like, name it. Like,
do they beat the Flames, who they match up with right now? If they played the Flames in a 7, will they beat the Flames in?
I don't even feel confident about that, like, to be honest, because they can't win in Calgary. They've lost the last 5 games there. So who knows? Because, like, and that's where your frustration goes, because, like, this doesn't feel like 2012. This doesn't feel like a team that, okay, like, at least you got a high-end elite young goalie that can maybe carry you throughout the playoffs. Darcy Kemper isn't that. David Rittich isn't that. Eric Portillo's not going to be that yet. So it's like the expectations are so limited. It's like as high as my roof. Like, well, Kings fans, like, want them to be as sky high, and that's where they deserve. And that's where the frustration and disappointment comes in.
I think you look at public appearance, isn't always anything for LA Kings fans, because most of those pundits are from the East Coast and they never stay up to watch the Kings. But if you listen to public opinion over the last 4 seasons, right? It's like, oh, the up and coming Kings, prospect Kings, and then they make the playoffs, and it's like, oh, good for the Kings. Like, they outplayed, nobody expected this, and they lost to the best player in hockey. And then the next season was, hey, they're making some moves and this and that. They're seeing some uptick from key players here and there, but there's still a long shot or whatever. And then now it's like the public opinion is Rob Blake going to be fired? Like, when you see the public opinion for the national media who never watches Kings hockey point out things like, man, the Kings are not very good at hockey, or they're doing a lot of things poorly and they're just scraping by here and there. They're missing key pieces, and they don't even watch the games on a regular basis. Something's wrong. Something is wrong. Like, I don't know where the stench is coming from or how to fix it, but there is a stench to this team, and they might make the playoffs. And I don't mean to be Mr. Pessimism, but I'm going to be, because I don't think this team has what it takes to do anything at this point. And maybe that'll wrong, because players can switch that around. Byfield can be previous Byfield. Clark Train can get on a ferocious tear, all this kind of stuff. We get Drew Doughty back. But right now, I'm going to tell it how it is. And this team stinks. This team has a stench. And I don't see where we chop off the limb to fix it.
It would be, what this is going to be kind of be like a well statement, but if the power play was even approaching league average, the Kings are probably leading the Pacific Division right now. It's that close in terms of the margin. Like, you've grab a few more goals there, you pick up a couple more wins, and before you know it, we could be having a different conversation. But that hasn't looked good in a while. So I don't know. I just keep going back to the fact that it's like, I want to be, and I am, like, kind of frustrated, but at the same time, the results been fine. I mean, I guess in large part they're beating a lot of teams that they quote unquote should be, like that Detroit. Detroit is Eisenman needs a new plan because I don't know what's going on there.
Detroit needs a new plan. Irisman isn't getting it done.
Seriously, like
Isaac's plan is
I don't
not
know
working.
what that team. I continue to be like
There's
disappointed.
some good players there too. That's not, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what they're doing there. The Buffalo game. So it's funny you mentioned that, Russ. You were talking to Andrew Knoll. Like Buffalo's been kind of almost like the Kings, honestly, this year, and it's like they can't like get anything going. They can't string something together. It's like it's kind of up and down. You know, and then you look at the lineup that they had. You're missing Tage Thompson, which is obviously a big loss for them. You know, the Kings had a little bit of a break. I felt really good going into that game that the Kings were going to maybe not do what they did to Detroit and kind of win pretty comfortably, but the Kings would control the game and they'd win it like a 3-1 type of thing. And it just didn't happen. So I don't know. I mean, I honestly don't know where to. It's hard. It's hard because again, I want to be consistent, and I always like to lean on 5-on-5 numbers, and I think they're pretty good at. They're still a good 5-on-5 team. The power play when it's this bad is something that can be detrimental. Like you don't have to have a top 10 power play necessarily, but you can't be like I think they're bottom 5. You can't have that. Like that is going to really be an issue. So I think.
The ticker is scrolling across the bottom. I'll tell you in a second.
Is there a level of confidence that
29th?
Yeah, that's not good. That's not good enough. And can that? It's hard to say. Like right now, we haven't seen it. Right, we're not seeing any real examples. I don't think in the power play to suggest that it's going to turn around in any significant manner. I mean, if
I remember the stat correctly, they scored 3 goals against Ottawa on the power play in that crazy game, and they've scored 5 goals since.
Yeah, and it hasn't been good. You know, I know they're going with 5 forwards right now. That hasn't been very good. These 2 games. So I don't know.
It's just it's like I'm with you, Joe. It's hard to be upset because you look at the standings, and I think Vegas won day, so I think they're 3 points ahead.
Okay,
but yeah, like. There's a lot of teams struggling. Like Edmonton's kind of doing their slow out the gates again. Same thing with Vancouver, who's dealing with some injuries now. So you look at the standings. I mean, you're spot on. Like there's power play goal here, there's power play goal there. Like probably wouldn't beat Buffalo. They probably beat Chicago. They probably beat San Jose. Like that's like 6 points right there,
right? Or
5 points right there. So it's like, where does that put them? So I don't agree with a lot of the sentiment of like, oh, like they got to fire Hiller or like make a change or anything like that because this team can be good. Like I still think there's some talent here. They just haven't been able to figure it out. It's just I'm just bored watching it. That's the only thing. It's just
and I think
hard to find entertainment out of it.
And I think the problem, Russ, and maybe just to like not to belabor the point, but it does seem like that we're seeing that, I think that the sentiment is that, fine, who cares? Like, even if the power play gets improved, that's not enough. Like, it may be enough on the margins, but it's not enough. I think Kings fans are looking now to April, right? And saying, that's fine, but let's say the power play improves a little bit to be a little bit more league average. Is that enough to get the Kings past Edmonton, Vegas, Vancouver, Dallas? And I think a lot of people would say no, and I would agree with that still right now. So I think that's the general sentiment, is that like it doesn't even matter if there's a improvement in the power play, like it's just still not good enough. And like I agree. Like I don't know that, I think Hiller is, from a result standpoint, has done fine. So I don't know, is there anything? I don't think firing him does anything, and I don't think there's really any conversation about that with how well the team has done from where they are in the standings. But like that's not a thing, and I don't think it should be. I think he's doing what he's been tasked to do,
and he's trying everything too. Like he had Warren Fogle playing center yesterday.
Yeah, he's got 5 forwards, and I've loved seeing 4 forwards late in games. Like,
Kempe playing defense. Yeah, it's great.
I gotta say, and I think I tweeted this. This is hilarious. Like, how does that not signal to Rob Blake and maybe we need a couple extra defensemen back here that can actually do something other than two that we have, to where we have to play Adrian Kempe. And I even think, was Byfield back there a little bit too? Or was it just Kempe? I could have sworn I saw another forward at some point. Anyways.
Well, Kill Thomas played defense in juniors if you need him to step in.
Yeah, it's like, this isn't a hint that while I love it from Hiller saying, well, I got to get somebody out there that can do something on the back end. I can't just have two guys. I can't play Spence and Clark the final 5 minutes of the game, 10 minutes of the game themselves. I got to mix something else up. And you're forced to put a forward back there because his general manager can't figure out that you got to have somebody with a little bit more ability on the back end. It's kind of comical to me when he does that.
I'm just glad he's doing it as opposed to putting Joel Edmondson out there with the net empty again.
Yes, agreed.
What's not comical is betting all your money on DraftKings. So DraftKings is our next sponsor here at THPN. And the 24-25 NHL season has still that new car smell. And the action has been heating up at DraftKings Sportsbook, the official sports betting partner of the NHL. It's super easy for first-timers to get that DraftKings Sportsbook going. Try betting on something simple like picking a team to win. If you're new to DraftKings, listen up. New customers bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets for your team to win. So I'm checking out the odds. I'm looking here. There's 2 games tomorrow. Winnipeg Penguins, Sabres Ducks. I'm looking, hey, maybe I'll take the Jets to win with the puck line, and I'll take the under in the Ducks game. If I parlay that, $10 pays me $52. Now, odds are subject to change, but you can make yourself a pretty penny here on DraftKings. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code THPN. That's code THPN for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins, to just bet $5. Only on DraftKings, the crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY, which is 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill and Casino and Resort in Kansas. 21 plus age eligibility varies by jurisdiction, void in Ontario. Bets must win in order to receive reward. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional customers and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/ice. Copyright NHL 2024. All rights reserved. Well, before we continue talking about the Kings, we're going to be talking about what's going on around the NHL in our next episode of Coast to Coast. We're talking about all things NHL outside the Kings here, so let's get it started with some hockey stories around the NHL. Joe, what's been perking your ears?
For me?
Yeah.
Brandon, one of our favorites, when we were back in our Ontario Rain Days in the Making It Rain podcast, one of our favorite prospects at the time was when they had a gluttony of right shot defenseman, Helge Grans, making his NHL debut for the Philadelphia Flyers. He's played 2 games. He's got an assist. And if you look under the hood, it's 2 games. So let's not get crazy, but he's been really good. So honestly, just a real quick shout out to Helge Grans, because I think I was a big fan of his as a prospect. I don't know that he's really progressed to where I thought he would get to. But we talk about often on this show how development and progression is never linear. And he's had 2 pretty good games to start his NHL career in Philly. So we'll see where that goes. But I definitely wanted to give a shout out to where it may be coast to coast, and we'll tie it back in here with former Ontario Reign and LA Kings product Helge Grans. I don't know if you guys had a chance to see anything related to that, but for those that were Reign fans, Helge Grans off to a good start in Philly.
Big fan of his, and I really liked his game. I thought they had that one really down season in the Reign, and then he got kind of traded away to make that deal work. I never thought that he was a number 1 defenseman, but I figured he could be a bottom 4 pairing and give some offensive upside, decent puck mover, some good size. I'm just glad that he got to realize his dream. He gets an assist, gets that puck on his wall. So good for Helge Grans.
Just another reminder of the horrible Cal Peterson contract.
Yeah.
That we're still paying for.
The depression continues, and the next depression is for all you Bostonians out there. Montgomery out as the coach for the Bruins. Pasternak pretty much came out and said our play on the ice led to a great man and a great coach being fired. So it seems like a lot of the heads of the team are kind of taking ownership of that, which they should. It's their play on the ice. But Boston feels like they had to make a move, and one of the better coaches of the NHL is now jobless. What do you guys think about the move there and maybe Boston as a whole?
Man, this is kind of – I feel so bad for Montgomery. This is none of his doing. I mean, this is a team that probably exceeded expectations last year and with the President's Trophy 2 years ago. I mean, and then everybody kind of expected them to have a drop-off when Patrice Bergeron left. They didn't. 109 points last year. Still looked like a great team. And then they spend all that money in the offseason with Zadorov and Lindholm, and then they gave that contract to Swayman. It's just like it's on the players. Like they just got to look inward, and I don't know. Like I don't know if they'll be better for it. I know they won today, like 1-0 or something like that, but they beat Utah, so it's nothing to really be too excited about. But I felt like maybe it was a little too early. I know it's just kind of like I think like the players and the fans were kind of like waiting for something. It got to the point where maybe they were just kind of waiting for something to happen. And unfortunately, it's always the coach because the first one acts. Like we saw obviously last year with LA when it was just the Kings were just struggling, and McClellan had to go. But for this one, I don't want to say it's too early, but like, you look at the record, it's not terrible. I mean, it's not great. It's not great, but it's not terrible. I mean, they're only like 4 or 5 points out of it, like what, top of the division or so, up there. I thought it was kind of surprising, to be honest with you.
I you know what? It probably is Montgomery's fault because the worst thing that he did was overperform last year, because this is what I expected from them last year, frankly, was to have this kind of reset, if you will. But they did such a great job last year that, the expectations were kind of elevated again coming into this season. And I just don't think the roster's that good. I didn't think they had really good center depth last year. They made a lot of it work. They had great goaltending, but I mean, the offseason moves have not worked so far. But I don't think I think this is probably about where they should be, but it's just, it looks way worse when you have the season that they had last year. But I think this falls way more on Sweeney and Neely than it does Montgomery. So that's what I think. I think it sucks for Montgomery, but it is what it is. Like, this is just the way it goes. The coach is going to be the one that takes the heat.
Yeah, some team's going to get a great coach in Montgomery. I don't know if it'll be this year or next year or whatever. It's going to be soon. He's going to probably be high on the list of any coaching vacancy that opens up. But, I mean, how many times have we talked about it? Like, you might have a great goalie, but once you pay him, you're at a big risk there. It's funny because, I see all these articles now, people talking about, oh, maybe the absent from training camp is what's causing Swayman to play so poorly. I'm like, no, now all of a sudden he's got a poor team playing in front of him, and that's not going to save him. He's not going to be able to save everything. I wonder if these are the Ranger fans kind of wondering, I don't know if we should give Shesterkin $12 million per year.
Yeah, and we talked about too, everybody's not even just us. Everybody talked about what it was going to be like for Ullmark and for Swayman, because they've shared duties the last couple of seasons. Now both of them are being asked to say, here you go. And maybe that's way too simplistic. But that's got to play some sort of factor, I would think.
This is what happens when you have a franchise that has these expectations. I mean, this is true. This team had 109 points last year, too. President's Trophy 2 years ago. They've won playoff series. Coach was fired, 20 or so games into the season when they stumble out the gates. That's what happens when you have high expectations. Sure. They're on the totally different spectrum than what LA is on in terms of their expectations and how the franchise kind of thinks of the team and how they evaluate them. It's pretty wild.
I think what's wild is, if anybody listened to Chicklets the other day, was what's going on down the the 5 freeway in Anaheim. Seems like it's pretty ugly down there. Joe, you brought it to our attention. What did you think about when you were listening to that?
It caught me just a little off guard. Like I obviously things haven't been going well in Anaheim. We've talked about it on this show quite a bit. It's like every year we're waiting for like, okay, this is the year they make an improvement, and it just doesn't happen. And sometimes it even feels like it gets worse. And you were waiting for it. And, they've talked about Cronin and bringing more of a structure and a defensive play, but we just haven't seen anything reflecting it. But the conversation on the Spit and Chicklets podcast was pretty brutal about the environment in Anaheim and how it seems like Cronin is very much not liked in that room or within the players on that team. Obviously we don't know, but it's just what they were talking about. But I thought that was really interesting. I mean, talk about a coach that a situation where a coach probably should get fired, because I still think there's enough on that team to where they shouldn't be this. I'm not saying that this is a playoff team, but there's a decent enough mix of young, higher to high-end talent on both the offensive and defensive side of the puck. You've got a sprinkling of veterans mixed in, and you're getting excellent goaltending. So to be where they are is I don't think they should be this bad. So if anything, Cronin's got to be a guy that's getting looked at this point as far as a coach that could be on the hot seat. I understand expectations aren't necessarily playoffs for this team, but you got to show some sort of improvement, and I don't know that we've seen anything.
I mean, yeah, if I was Anaheim, I'd be probably, hey, sorry, Cronin, like it's not working out, and just hire Jim Montgomery like right away. Like, hey, you have a guy who maybe he's got some respect from the players there, the young players there, that realize what he's done with the Bruins, even though they haven't won a cup. But yeah, like when I saw that, or when I heard it, and it's tough because, like, yeah, you obviously don't want to believe everything, but Chicklets guys bought themselves a lot of credibility after the whole Mike Babcock Columbus situation. So now when they make a statement like this, that's going to turn a lot of heads. And like some of the things they said, like, yeah, it's just players have just totally lost trust in the coach, and it's just like the locker room and things like hell on earth or something crazy along those lines. It was like, holy hell, like what's going on down there? Because yeah, I totally agree with you, Joe. And I will say, like, winning does cure all, I feel like. I mean, they've won 4 of their last 5 games. Some of those wins, I mean, Columbus, Detroit, Chicago, they had a big win in Detroit and Dallas. So there's that. But even then, you look at a lot of their metrics and whatnot, like they just, yeah, I mean, for a coach that probably is coming in trying to instill a little bit more defensive structure into an environment that features players like Trevor Zegras and Frank Vetrano and young players like Leo Carlson, it's not working. But I mean, even if you had like just the slightest bit of uptick in defense, you certainly have the goaltender to fall back on, because Dostal, man, like that guy's amazing. Like, he's incredible. Like, every time I watch one of the Ducks games, I'm like, he's coming up with like 35, 40 plus save games. And it's like, man, like if you gave that guy a little bit like of help, like you probably looking pretty good. And it's funny because they're sitting 500, they're 8-2. They're not too far out, but I don't trust them to be any better with some of the metrics and the way that they play. It's not sustainable.
I think the last one here before we move back on to the Kings is Old Man Rivers over here, Ovechkin, nearing Gretzky's record and pacing faster than Gretzky did it. Gets injured mid-season. I haven't checked to see the status of the injury. Joe, you brought it to our attention as well. What's going over there in Washington?
Well, so yeah, and it was actually, I think, off a game where he had, talk about on fire, was leading the league in goals, hat trick. I think he had a 2-goal. It was a 2-goal night, the game he got hurt. And actually there is an update. He's going to be out 4 to 6 weeks. I believe it's a broken one of the bones in his leg, tibia, fibula. Somebody with anatomy can correct me. I'll have to find the report, but it's going to be a 4 to 6 week injury for Ovechkin, which it sucks just because of how well he's turned around. I think regardless of if you're rooting for Ovechkin to break the record or not, because I know there's a lot of people that are, tried and true Gretzky fans, whether they're Oiler fans, Kings fans, Canadians, whatever, that don't want to see Ovechkin break it because of that. Like, if he's going to do it, which it certainly looked like he was going to, you want to see him do it like this. You want to see him do it where he's scoring at a high level. You don't want to see him like break the record on a season where he has like 10 goals. Like you want to see him do it when he's playing at a high enough level. And he really bounced back this year. We've talked about Washington during one of our coast to coast segments throughout this season a couple times, actually, about how well they're doing this season. So it's nice to see that if he was going to do it, he's doing it at a high level. So unfortunately for him, 4 to 6 weeks with a tibia injury. See, here's the thing. These guys can't even figure it out in the chat. Look at Lieb comes in with tibia. Carter Score says left fibula fracture. You guys are absolutely no help. So either way, he's out 4 to 6 weeks, and it does suck.
Left fibula. I'm looking at White Capital's PR.
Okay.
Carter Scores
does it.
Carter Scores does it. Lieb,
I think it's just crazy how maybe unappreciated players are, that if you're a Washington fan, you get one cup, but you see one of the greatest goal scorers to ever play the game, night in and night out, and how he still does it, even at an old age. And we watch a team that can barely put the puck in from a danger area, and Ovechkin's doing it at 40 years old, drinking whiskey and smoking cigars during intermissions and whatever else he's doing out there. I think it's just amazing, and it's nice to recognize talent. When talent's in front of you.
Hopefully he's able to bounce back, and obviously now this probably takes out the chance for him to break this record this year. But like I said, if he's going to do it, I want him doing it playing at a level like this season that he's playing at. I want him playing at a high level.
You don't want him limping in at 52 years old.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
How far was he? Like 20s?
26, I think.
Something like that. Is he that close? Oh, I thought he was still like 30 something away. But yeah, he's been hot, man. He's been hot.
It's I think that thing that upsets me the most is because with how hot he was, I mean, the Capitals come to LA in March.
Yeah.
So it was like kind of like, okay, well, like maybe it's kind of
will he beat it there?
A little Dubois to Ovechkin action.
Oh, God.
Dubois assist on Ovechkin's game, Gretzky beater. Yeah.
They lost today, but Dubois scored the lone goal. I was watching that game earlier. Mount Royce still looks good.
Well, that was our episode here of Coast to Coast, and that was brought to you by Raycon. And so I don't know about you guys, but I like a good deal. Whether it's Black Friday or Cyber Monday, a deal is a deal. Except for Raycon, because Raycon gets you these amazing deals year round. And that doesn't mean they're not having any extra sales for Black Friday or Cyber Monday. Far from it. They're actually doubling down on their amazing value by finding viewers up to 30% site-wide. So a Cyber Monday deal you can appreciate every day. That's Raycon's everyday earbuds, especially if you haven't checked out the latest model, which includes plenty of new features that make them even more must-have for the audio lover. For example, now a feature is 32-hour battery life and multi-point connectivity that allows you to pair 2 devices at once. Raycon's everyday earbuds also allows you to come with some active noise cancellation feature, which comes in handy for me on long flights or in the gym or just walking around the city. I know I like to just go for some nice walks in the weather. And I just put the earbuds in and get the old thought process going. But it's not only just that, because another thing Raycon does, it rivals the bigger names in premium auto, and then at a half of the price. So you're looking at, hey, I'm already getting this incredible deal, and now you're factoring the Cyber Monday 30% off. This is a no-brainer. So I really like the way they fit in my ears. I like the way I work out with them. They fit well. The audio is good. They're easy to use with just the one touch on the earbuds. Raycon Everyday Earbuds is also available in a variety of colors. I decided to stick with the black, but if you want to go in a different direction to fit your style, they got you covered. Now's the perfect time to scoop them up, even if you haven't already. And don't worry, if you're not as impressed as I am, Raycon offers a 30-day guarantee for your happiness, so they can't lose. So it's time to save big for Cyber Mondays. Go big and buy at raycon.com/THPN today to get up to 30% off site wide. That's right. You get up to 30% off everything Raycon's website when you go to buyraycon.com/THPN. Well, boys, we talked about the season so far and where do the Kings go from here? I know we're saying maybe it's a power play goal here or, this metric, but ultimately the functionality of the team has to change. Maybe what are some bright spots of this team and how can the Kings build off that?
I want to start this one because I want to go in a slightly different direction than, we've talked a lot about, the 5-on-5 play is good. The power play stinks. If the power play gets better, if we get better production, blah, 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 blah. And not to downplay any of those because I think that's all fair. Let's start small. Let's start very, very small and take baby steps. Can we get Jacob Moverari in the lineup every game? I mean, he has been a fan favorite or a favorite of this show since its inception, at least for Randon and I going back to Making It Rain, and we've been doing this show, and I don't understand what the dilemma is or what the issue is with getting Jacob Moverari playing on a game in, game out basis. And he can, anytime he comes up, the coach raves about how well he's playing. And then the second it's time that whatever the reason is that he's here, if there's an injury or whatever it is, he's immediately back down, no questions asked. And so just to touch on in the 2 games that he's played so far, 61.9 shot attempt share, 85% expected goal share, 78% scoring chances, 78% high danger chances. Like, okay, well, that's only 2 games. I want to give you guys a little bit now over the course of since he's come into the NHL, which I think was back to the 21-22 season. He's played 47 games in the NHL. 56.2 shot attempt share, 64.2 expected goal share, 63.4 scoring chances share, 59.4 high danger chances share. I don't know what more he has to do. I mean, this is what's funny about this is I'm such a big Moverari fan, and I think it just totally flies in the face that everybody thinks that all I want is like young, fast, and small, skilled defenseman. No, I want a guy that's capable of playing. Just that he doesn't, and he's not even the strongest of skater, but he makes a really good first pass. He gets us up and out of the zone. Like he doesn't. The Kings are almost never hemmed into the ice when he's around. It's like. And yet they go out of their way to bring in players that are just, frankly, inferior, right? To name names, Englund and Burrows. And they signed a guy to 4 years at $3.85 million per. They have a guy sitting in Ontario who can do just the same. No, I'm sorry. He can do much more. I don't know what else we have to see from Moverari that, like, until Doughty gets back, because obviously at that point, you're probably going to get back to Anderson, Doughty, Gavrikov, Spence, Edmondson, Clark. That is what it is. But until then, there's no reason that Jacob Moverari shouldn't be playing every single day over a Burrows or Andreas Englund. And as much as I think Caleb Jones has done a nice job, Moverari should play. I'm starting there. Like this isn't like a big change. This should be like low hanging fruit of like let's just start here.
And one of the main reasons I love what Moverari, or one of the big things I love what Moverari done just in the 2 games is he's elevated the game of Jordan Spence. Jordan Spence has played, and I was watching it yesterday. Like yesterday was probably Jordan Spence's best game of the season. And I mean, you look at some of the numbers when Jordan Spence is paired with Jacob Moverari. Shots are 16-6 in the Kings' favor, and they have an expected goal share of 91.6, 2.46 to 0.23. Like we're starting to see Jordan Spence and what we kind of hoped to see once Drew Doughty went out, and probably a big reason of that is because he's playing with Jacob Moverari, and they have a lot of that chemistry going back to their time with the Reign, and that was one of the big reasons that Hiller even mentioned why they brought him up. and it's worked out. So at this point, if they end up taking Moverara out, like, I have no idea what he needs to do to play. And it's going to be something we're going to have to ask Hiller about that, because it's funny because we go back to last year. McClellan said the same thing. I think it was Matt Roy that went out, or Gavrikov, somebody. I think it was Gavrikov. Gavrikov was out after the Islanders game. Yeah. And Moverara came in and McClellan just raved about him. And then sure enough, once there's like a couple games later, he's back down. It's like, what the hell? Like, what else does this guy have to do? And I think now that we're starting to see Jordan Spence maybe hopefully get his game back to what we hope to see, like, those two have to stick together. It's plain simple, easy.
Yeah, but it's King's Brass, and we probably won't get that.
Of course.
So, no, I mean, the tuna's been one of my favorite. Tuna's good on a sandwich and he's good on the ice. And so
I think what you like, sorry, real quick. I think what he's done a little bit better that'll probably make King's Brass happy is you see a little bit more physicality out of him. Because when he came up, like, I forget if it was last year, the year before that, like, you can tell, like, he didn't have a lot of meat on his bones. He wasn't the biggest guy. But now I think we're starting to see him playing with a lot more confidence and a lot more physicality and intensity. Like, I've seen him just kind of pin guys along the boards, stop plays in their tracks, and do a lot of things that Hiller, I hear, rave about what Joel Edmondson does. So it's like, I mean, what else do you need at that point?
So you're saying, Tuna ate some more tuna, put on some weight?
Right.
There you go.
Can I say too, you talked about Jordan Spence with Moverare and how good he's been. And I know Spence has taken a lot of heat here for the start to a season, and I think it's fair. Like, he's certainly not had the start to the season that we all hoped. But I got to say, I'm looking at not a lot, but some of the numbers when I look at, depending on his defense partner, like the only partner that he's just not good with is Mikey Anderson. Like, his numbers away from Mikey with anybody else are pretty good. Like, his shot share is over 50% with every single shot attempt share within every single defenseman, with the exception of Mikey Anderson, where it's 42%, which was painfully low on a Kings team, which controls all of it. Actual shots on goal, same thing. Well over 50% across the board, except for it's only 46 with Mikey. Expected goals is a little bit different. There's a couple of guys, Burrows, he struggles with too, and Caleb Jones, but for the most part, it's just Mikey Anderson. Now, maybe this is a separate conversation, but kind of talking Randon and tying it into, like, where do we go from here? Looking at another player who the Kings kind of need to get going. Like, is Jordan Spence now, does that what I just kind of laid out, where his numbers, if you look at his numbers away from Mikey Anderson, it's actually not that bad. So does that mean the fit with Mikey Anderson isn't there or hasn't been there for whatever reason? Or does that mean the numbers with Mikey Anderson are not that good because maybe Jordan Spence isn't either ready / capable of playing A, those minutes, and B, that competition?
The latter.
Yeah, I think when you give him those extra minutes, it's kind of, we're starting to see a little bit creep up into his game. I think he's more suitable for those, I don't want to say bottom pair minutes, but maybe second pair, bottom pair. Because when he's playing probably 16, 18 minutes a night, he looks great. And I feel like maybe against tougher competition, he's probably struggling a little bit.
And what we brought up in the beginning of the year, or at least what I brought up as my concern, is his size.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
His size to play consistent top line minutes against the better competition. 20 plus minutes a night. Can his body hold up to that season wide? Like, we're only 20 games in, but it doesn't look like it. Maybe not his body, but like his stature and everything like that maybe isn't built to be a number one. It's a 2-3 or second or third pair, second power play style guy, and there's room in every single lineup for those players.
Mm-hmm. True.
I think where this team can improve, obviously on the power play, but I think where I kind of want to go with this next one is just Byfield is not playing well at all. And Byfield's got to figure it out. And I don't know where in his game, like, he's been decent on the half wall. He's been making those aggressive plays. He hasn't really been taking the puck to the net very often. So that's kind of where it needs to be. He doesn't shoot very often either when he makes a dangle play. So I don't know, because he's trying to make the dangle. So the confidence seems to be there, but the confidence doesn't seem to be there when he's not shooting the puck. I don't know if it's line mates. That's just another question mark to the season. I don't know what fixes Quentin Byfield, or if he even needs fixing and it's just not working for him at the moment. I kind of just at a loss for where Quentin Byfield needs to go for the rest of the season.
Yeah, when I watch Byfield play, I actually see a player that just has no confidence in his game right now.
Okay.
Like there was one play he had yesterday, had the puck, got a good entry, and then just stopped it like in high slot or along the half wall, somewhere around there. Turns it over, takes a penalty going the other way, and it's like Kevin Fiala would have been benched for that, like right then and there. And I feel like I've seen Byfield, like I hope he stops doing it, but if you pay attention, like when he gets into the zone where he has entry into the zone, he'll just stop, and he just, like you said, Randy, he just doesn't drive the puck to the net. And it's like, dude, like you have to like dude, you're like 6'5", 220 pounds, right? Like take that sucker to the net and like move somebody. Like that goal you had against Montreal, like you just put Caden Gooley in a spin cycle there, like because he couldn't knock you off the puck. Like, and I feel like every time he gets it in the offensive zone, he's just looking pass first. And that lack of confidence is hurting his willingness to shoot the puck. He's just not putting it on net. He's looking to pass first. And I feel like he's got to, like, as much as I hate to say it, because I wanted to see him at center, I feel like you just have to put him back up with Kopitar and Kempe at this point, just to try to get him to elevate his game a little bit or find some confidence in his game, because maybe that move to the center ice position has kind of been like, okay, it's now an added responsibility that he's probably thinking a little bit too much now on the ice, as opposed to just playing that free flowing style that we saw the last few years. Because even when he wasn't producing toward the end of like 2 years ago, when McClellan was kind of praising him, yeah, like he was still doing all the little things right. He wasn't scoring, but he was still making plays. He was still getting assists left and right, playing alongside Kopitar and Kempe. So he was still doing all the little things right. But right now, he's just not doing anything good. And it's just more or less hurting the team as opposed to helping the team right now with where he's playing. And like even like playing with LaFerriere and Fogle, like both of those players, their numbers are now have gone down playing with Byfield compared to playing with Alex Turcotte. So I feel like you just have to go back to that line with Turcotte back in the middle, and you put Byfield up top on the wing, and then hopefully you can regain some confidence. And who knows, maybe once Byfield gets going a little bit, you can kind of slot him back in the center, maybe here and there, like in game, to kind of just not get him thinking about it too much, because right now that's just all in his head at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's fighting it right now. I don't think he's playing like poorly necessarily, but it just isn't coming. Like it's just not clicking. It's not coming freely to him like it seemed to last year. It's hard. I think I guess I agree, Russ, that they can move him back to the wing and put him with Kopitar and Kempe. I mean, it's at some point I think they got to come to just whatever they do decide, let's just keep it and stop with the back and forth and let's just let him run with it wherever it is that he goes. I know they made the move to the 5 forward power play, which means he's kind of seeing some PP1 time, which I know part of that is to try to get him going a little bit, but that hasn't worked so far for the couple games they've done that. So, I still think that he's doing a lot of things that are fine. That are it's the production just hasn't kind of shown up yet, but they need him. They quite obviously need. I mean, we talked about it before the season. I said the Kings, like, if they have no shot at advancing past the first round, if they don't get a Quentin Byfield that takes the next step, and at least right now, we haven't seen it.
Yeah, we haven't seen anything close to what we saw from Byfield in the preseason. And I like Dan P here asking that question. Would a benching like Kev help or make matters worse? I don't think it's got to the point where they need to bench him.
No, I agree with that.
I think the move to the 5 forward unit on the power play, I understood it. Like, you're trying to maybe help Byfield a little bit. Like, and I like the innovative kind of thinking there, especially with Kempe up top. But now, like, the more I watch it, it's like you take away probably your best weapon by having Kempe at the point. Like, Kempe's one-timer is this power play's best weapon. And now you're kind of forced into him and Fiala now going back and forth, and Fiala being the one-time option, and it's not working. It's not there. And Byfield's not even really getting the touches down low. And when he is, he's fumbling them. And Bryant Clark's just sitting there on the second unit, and that unit looked almost better than the first unit last night. And partly is because of Bryant Clark's presence on that unit. You just have to get Clarkey back up there in PP1.
I would agree.
You can't sit my boy.
Yeah. So here's my take on the power play, because I think we're seeing more in Central. I think, like in the slot area, we're seeing Kopitar flow into that bumper role quite a bit more, which is good. But I think, again, I go back to the handedness. So Kopitar is left-handed, and I just think that they don't have a right-handed playmaker. Like Alex Laferriere is doing a really good job this season at 5-on-5 as a goal scorer, but not necessarily as a playmaker. And I think we saw a little bit of this before they made the move to the 5 forwards, where Clark, I think if they're going to operate in a 1-3-1, and if you're going to have that lefty and Kopitar in the bumper, the swap I would make would be keep Clark and flip Laferriere and Byfield. The reason I say that is I think you can move Clark to the left circle. I think a lot of times in a 1-3-1, your kind of facilitator, if you will, your quarterback isn't always necessarily at the point, because you talked about, Russ, where the King is a lot of the one of the biggest weapons the Kings try to do on the power play. We don't see them use that little triangle play a lot. Certainly not since Velarde's been here, where they go down low to what was Velarde, quick play to the bumper. We don't see that play quite a bit. What they try to do is they do try to find that cross seam to Adrian Kempe. That's why we see them up on the perimeter a lot, because they're trying to open up that pass and slide it over to Kempe. I think, though, my opinion, that with Bryant Clark, I mean, if Kempe's in the right circle for that one-timer, and if Kopitar is the lefty in the bumper, so you got 2 lefty passing options, if you can't have that right shot down low, because they just don't have a forward that's a right-handed playmaker, having Clark as the right shot on the left circle, that gives him that kind of, the way he has a right-handed shot, the vision and the setup to where he can play catch with whoever it is at the top. Maybe it's Fiala. Mm-hmm. And then you've got that potential cross seam play to Adrian Kempe. It's a righty to lefty. He can go down to Byfield. They can play catch a little bit. Byfield can be down low to buy a little bit of time and space. He can go to Kopitar in the bumper, and he can bump it right back to Bryant Clark. And you can see those passes coming from those seam plays. Because if Clark gets it, he's passing it from the top. It's you're not going to get the goalie moving quite as much. Whereas if you're starting from the left circle and you're able to execute a cross seam pass, it's a lot longer that the goalie's going to have to go. It's a harder pass to connect, but I think that's what they're looking to do a lot of the times. Although, and now they've kind of shifted Kempe up top. I don't know. I get it, but I don't know. I'd like to see Clark, just because he's their really only true right-handed playmaker. And I think it's probably a lot to ask for him to go down low and be below the goal line, as kind of crazy as I would love.
He's comfortable down there.
I kind of would like to see that, just to talk about having the option of the right-handed guy to make the play. But obviously there's more to it than that. That may be a little bit of an adjustment, but that's where I'd go. I still think the problems remain the same, where they, even with the 5 forward setup, there's been times where it looks like maybe there's something that could come to fruition of a play, but we're seeing a lot of the same. And without a true right-handed playmaker down low, they don't have a great bumper option, because that just whole play kind of breaks down sometimes. And without having a true right-handed playmaker on the left circle, the left flank, It kind of takes away from the cross seam play to Kempe a little bit. I don't know. The easy thing to do here is to get on the power play coach and to say all that. And I get it. Like you shouldn't be 29th in the league, like regardless, but it's a little awkward. The pieces aren't really fitting. And we saw that last year. And I think last year, they finished just outside the top 10. Drew Doughty was a big reason for that. You know, he had a lot of goals from the point, slappers from the point, which I don't necessarily think are very high percentage, but they went in last year. I don't know how sustainable that is. So you'd like to see them be a little bit more creative, but it just hasn't worked. And it's a little clunky still at times right now. And I think part of that is the personnel.
Yeah, I could see them taking the Ferrier off, but I mean, yeah, you just lose that righty option on that side.
It's amazing how you pull one player like Velarde and the whole power play falls apart.
I mean, even Arvidsson too. Like he was the same way. Like he was an option down low.
Yeah,
and he would make those slot passes all the time, or even cross seam passes to Kempe. We saw that at times, but I don't know. Like something's got to change. Like, and I don't. It's and maybe it's just got to be personnel. Like you just got to keep finding new ways. The 5 forward thing is it's just not working. I mean, you have 5 opportunities and you're not able to score one time. And I know they had their chances, they had their looks, but even then, like you have to figure out a way to score. And it's weird too, because the first like the game against Detroit, the opportunity that they had looked great. Like Hiller, it was funny. Like we're sitting in the media room and the press conference is about to wrap up, and Hiller was like, "You guys aren't going to ask me about the power play?" Like he was so happy to talk about it. And like I looked over to Noel and I was like, "You think Hiller's going to ask us to ask him about the power play this game?" Like, it looked bad. It was just got to the point where like, geez, like man, like decline the penalty at this point. And I don't know, maybe you try something drastic like move Fiala down to the second power play unit and get him maybe there, like he can generate a lot of chemistry with his line mates playing there. I don't know, like I know that's tough ask because he's probably your best playmaker, at least up front, but you got to try something at this point. And whatever it is, Clarkie's just got to be on the first unit because his playmaking, not only his playmaking ability, but his ability to get the puck through is just probably what's lacking. Because I know Kempe's got his shot, but I don't know if he's as good as what Clark can do from the point.
Yeah, it's different because if you think Kempe, I know he's so good at scoring off the rush. He uses it, he's great speed, so he scores a lot of goals that way at 5-on-5. And then on the power play, a lot of times he's in that right circle using that one timer. It's different. Just he's up at the top, so sure he's touching it more because by nature of being up there, but that's not where he does his damage. Right. I don't know. It was the expectation that he was going to touch the puck, take a couple of stick handles and step into one and just let one go. I mean, I was that the plan? Because you don't see it happens. It's just a lot of times the one-time plays, usually you're looking for them on a seam play, not necessarily setting up Kempe, because now you're getting a shot from the blue line. Like that's, a few steps.
Yeah, he talks about liking I think in the Detroit game, like he talks about Kempe and Fiala kind of playing catch there, and it turned into like a couple Fiala one-timers. But yeah, it's like, wouldn't you want Kempe taking those? Like that's like right. That's his bread and butter. And you're not going to put Fiala at the point because that just spells doom for that's like Sean Durzi turnovers like all over again. Like no, like
so that's where I go back to what throws a wrench in my idea of having Clark on the left circle and being the facilitator from there. Because think Clark on that left circle, like the way he kind of moves laterally, he could very easily kind of skate, and we see him will skate backwards with the puck sometimes, even in the neutral zone. We can see him skate backwards toward the goal line and just watch as he's scanning and things open up. Like I can see an avenue there. The problem with that is who the hell plays up top, because we just talked about Kempe's better at the right circle. So now we're talking about, do we put Cav up top? And I mean, that's let's go like that. Yeah, that could be some problems. I totally agree with that. So that throws a wrench into my idea of having Clark play the left circle. But honestly, I think you got to get him back on the unit, and I think you got him get him in a spot where he can facilitate.
It can't get worse.
Yeah,
No.
it definitely can't get worse. But it feels like we're getting to a point now, and they've done a good job kind of treading water up until now. But it's like we're really missing Drew Doughty, and you're starting to see a lot of the situations and even just maybe even locker room and post game stuff where you really miss a fiery player like Doughty. And it's like, man, you just hope he can come back soon. I saw him in the press box. He's still wheeling around on that scooter. I wanted to ask him, I was like, dude, you should put some wheels on that, put some rims on that bad boy, just get some spinners or something. But man, it's tough because like I would have loved to see like some of these games, like you're like, man, like I wish Doughty was here because like he'd stop like momentum the other way or whatever. Like you just know he's got that fire in him to lit it under this team a little bit.
He's needed a lot, not just on the ice, but we talked about it with Sinbin for Vegas and the lack of Marchessault and what he meant to that locker room and how he was a buffer to the coaching staff for the rest of the boys. You know, I feel that Doughty brings kind of that youthful energy to the group and keeps it light and you know, I think Gavrikov kind of adds a little bit of the same, but brings that different attitude. And when you're pressing the way this team is kind of pressing to score goals, you need that kind of atmosphere a little bit to kind of lighten the mood in the locker room. And Doughty would definitely bring that. I think the last thing that we want to talk about before maybe we get separated here is we've talked about Rivara, we talked about things, you know, with Byfield. I think Turcotte's kind of come back with his minutes and now he's there. If Byfield can't solidify the C, we need somebody to solidify the center position, and Turcotte needs to be given that opportunity if they don't feel Byfield can do it.
And that's where Turcotte, I feel like, has looked the best.
Yep.
Is that, I mean, there was that stretch there where Laferriere, Turcotte, and Fogle were the best line that this team had. And when no one else was scoring, it would seem like that line was just doing it all. I remember that game in Anaheim where they were just all over the puck. And we saw it at times before Turcotte got hurt in Nashville when he was playing with Kopitar and Kempe. But like it feels like it hurt the other players more than it helped the top line. Like it hurt Laferriere and Fogle more than it helped Kopitar and Kempe with Turcotte there. So I feel like there's an added benefit there if you can switch Byfield and Turcotte to maybe elevate Byfield's game a little bit, and then you can elevate the third line, and hopefully that second line can get going a little bit with Deneau, Moore, and Fiala.
Definitely so. So I think he's kind of earned it, and that he seems to elevate every line that he's on, and hopefully we can get some consistent play out of a line, because I think once one line gets consistent, it might start to bleed out to the rest of the lineup. We've got consistency from Rivara, we've got consistency from Turcotte, and maybe that'll start to bleed out going forward. Next game is the Kraken. Not easy, winnable, but a winnable game on Saturday. We'll see how this team looks with the identity. I know how everybody else has been looking at the chat. You guys have been great tonight. Please hit that like button on the way out. You can find all of our articles here at hockeyroyalty.com. All of our Twitter handles are floating across the bottom, hockey_royalty, Random Commando 24, NHL Russell, and JW Paterino. For all your rain coverage, hit up Kyle. Kyle's doing a great job there. Kopitar for HOF, doing all the rain coverage as well as all your prospect knowledge. So again, thank you guys for being in the chat. Hit that like button on your way out. And as always on this podcast, go Kings go.